5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're already over. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of The Crow's Nest. This isn't actually an official episode of The Crow's Nest. This is me teaching Shaded Metallics. So welcome. Thank you so much for all the folks that are on the Twitcher watching all this. We're going to do a little class on one of my favorite topics to teach is Shaded Metallics. So we're going to jump into it here in a second. I kind of maybe wanted to give a couple of minutes since we're right at the top of the hour right now for all the folks to make sure that everyone's going to jump in that's going to jump in. But at some point, we're just going to need to get rolling. What we're going to do today is teach Shaded Metallics. And what is Shaded Metallics, right? So it's shading metallic paints. It's probably not that, that obvious, but really when it boils down to it, what we're going to be utilizing is all the cool metallic paints. And even we're going to test out some of the new ones that were part of the Reaper various boxes for the con this year. I'm going to show you my go-tos in the way I teach the class. And I'm going to try to set this up as I would normally teach at ReaperCon. And so if you guys have taken this class before, I know a few of you have. I have sometimes years when folks will take in the class over and over and over. I really appreciate that. But let's get into it. Today we're going to be working on Logrim, which is a armored dwarf, and he's from the Warlord line. And here he is. And all I did was prime him white. I selected him for a couple of reasons. Because he's got this nice uniform back. I mean, the right side and the left side are pretty much the same on the armor standpoint. So you'll see that we've painted him blue and green, and I'll get back to that. But we're going to be demonstrating steel and weathered steel and gold or bronze and weathering that and shading that down and making it pop and everything. Another reason I chose him too, if you guys had grabbed him, was there was a metal version and then there's a bones version. I had a few metal versions from teaching this class. I've used him for a bunch of classes in the past, and I wanted something that, he's kind of small, but since these are online class and you guys had to buy your own figures if you wanted to follow along, I wanted to make sure there was something that was pretty inexpensive. So the bones version was a couple of bucks. So hopefully that works out. So what are we doing today? So we're going to be doing Shaded Metallics, and of all the years that I've painted this guy, there are a couple of finished versions, but they're at Reaper, of course. And I didn't even think about asking them to send them to me. And I had planned on trying to finishing them up, but schedules got in the way. But so what I wanted to show a few examples of the Shaded Metallics that I've done in the past, and they can be. And here's a little. This is from Rackham Figures, Rackham Confrontation. They're a company that's from France that went out of business a while back. They let's see, make sure my lights are all on. Okay, they could be super small. And things can, and the Shaded Metallics can help things pop a lot more. And then you can go up. Here was one of the 25th anniversary miniatures. Jason Weeby sculpted this. Various Shaded Metallics parts, and they are good to blend in with just your normal painting of your figure as well. So if I go Shaded Metallics, I will really try to help make them be a central focus point of the figure as well, to help them pop, just like a lot of people do with NMM, and I do as well with NMM as well. But the shininess of it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then I also wanted to show you guys where you can take things. Although we're doing a tiny figure today, this is one of my favorite pieces. Don't want to dip his hat into the paint. This is Don Quixote. He was from Nuts Planet, I believe. And this is Shaded Metallics, and what we're going to be discussing today, just at a much larger scale and larger standpoint as well. So what we're going to be doing today is going over the theory of Shaded Metallics, knocking down, doing the shading, popping highlights, and then we're going to be doing some tinting and glazing. And I think Normally with this, I always kind of struggle in a person class because I want to try to make sure everyone's keeping up and make sure everyone's getting the value out of the class that's possible. It's a little bit different, of course, online streaming. I usually ask the question, hey, what's everybody's goals? Why did you sign up for the class? Why did you want to take this class? What do you want to learn? And then because I asked that question, and then what do you want to achieve from your painting? Do you want to be a competition painter? Do you want to just paint better tabletop? What are you looking to do? So although we're going to have a bunch of people on today, and we're around almost 170 plus, I think it's hard to ask that question now, but we will. I'm going to try to teach this from like, okay, how can you apply this as a beginning standpoint, and then how can you continue to level up? All right. So when we're doing shaded metallics, you paint something metallic and you put it under the light. And here's one that I kind of worked on a little bit so far, and we're going to use him for glazing. You put the metal surface, the metallic paints on. Is that enough? Well, when you do a base coat on a miniature, of course, that's not enough too. The addition, though, the kind of the tricky part with metallics is they have a shininess to them. So that's what we want to focus on, and that's what we want to capture, but we want to capture it in the right places. People compare shaded metallics versus non-metal metal all the time, and which is better and which is da-da-da. I don't think either one is necessarily better. It's really what you want to do, maybe what that piece speaks to you and what you want to bring into it. You can achieve super clean results either way. You can achieve certain gritty, dirty results either way. I like if I want to go super gritty, dirty, I like shaded metallics for that. But it's a lot of times it's just the piece. I am quicker doing shaded metallics just because I've been doing it for a while, but some folks will say, well, NMM takes a lot more time. Yeah, it does. But shaded metallics can take a lot of time too. I mean, the Don Quixote I showed you was probably 60 plus hours in working on that. So you can go crazy if you really want to. So what are we using today? And you'll see on the palette, and I listed this in the directions or the outline. You'll see that we're shaded metallics in the figure that I showed you. Oh wait, you're painting shaded metallics. Why do you have green and blue on there? And the two of the colors I use is Ashen Blue and Highlands Moss. Ashen Blue will be tied to our metallics color. Today I grabbed Tarnished Steel. Ta-da! And the Highlands Moss is going to be tied to Old Bronze. Why is that? Okay, so prime miniatures white, and people will do the zenithal. Well, they'll do the black undercoating and white popping on the top, and I do that too. For this guy, I just primered him white. But painting a metallic paint over a white primer, or heck, even really over a black primer to a lesser degree, but for a white primer, over that will zap or rob some of its impact, some of its effect. So I will undercoat or first level a base coat with a desaturated color. These are desaturated colors. What's the difference? Just for color theory purposes, there's all different levels watching. These are two blues, saturated, desaturated. Why desaturated is I want to help for instance, Ashen Blue with Tarnished Steel. I want to help that steel when it gets applied to the miniature. I want to help it communicate the blue in there, but not overpower it. If it's a saturated color underneath, it can bleed through and kind of ruin your overall effect. When we get towards the end of the shaded metallics part, we're going to be doing some glazing and some tinting, and that'll give us the color pops we need. So you don't need to get the color pop underneath. We just want to create a base to help that metallic paint read well and cover evenly. Now, you'll see that these are the two colors that I grabbed for Old Bronze and Tarnished Steel. Old Bronze. If you guys don't have this color, this is really my go-to color for, of course, bronze, gold, treasures, armors, you name it. I will 99% of the time start with this color. There's a lot of other great paints out there, but this is really my go-to. And you'll notice too, I tend to start with the more darker metallic colors. And I want to highlight up. Because it's called Shaded Metallics, it's giving me a dark range to begin with, and then I can work up. And it's almost, for me, flipping the mentality of painting. I will tend to paint with typical just acrylic non-metallic paints. I will tend to paint a shade or two brighter in my base coat, and it not being my true midtone. Midtone be here, it'll be a couple steps brighter. But with metallics, I flip that a little bit just because it helps. I want to focus more on the shading, and then the popping the highlights, since it's shiny, and we'll go through this, is just a little bit easier. So if you guys are painting along, grab your Logrim guy or whoever. And if you've got another miniature, of course, it's going to be the same thing that you want to do. Grab your green and your blue. If you have those two colors that I showed, great. Just find something desaturated. It's not critical that it's the same paints. I also wanted to say, if you don't have to do blue, you don't have to use green. You can use a desaturated orange under the gold if you'd like. You can use a desaturated, super desaturated green under the steel if you want to do that. It's really just trying to keep that white from robbing the energy. And then if you want to, what we're going to do too, so start painting, maybe half here and half there. I think that'd be good to do. I'm going to put my glasses on, and we're going to do a quick demo. And I do this even though this is Shaded Metallics class. I want to kind of go over a little bit of base coating and making sure we have a nice even layer. Now when I do my paints, it's usually about a 1-to-1 mix, especially with base coating. And I will make sure we're in the frame and do a nice covering. And you'll see that I just painted over something that was a little shiny. What that was a mold line that was right there that I didn't clean off. Well, right before the class started, and as I dropped that into the paint. If you see a mold line that you forgot to clean, you've already primed it. It's a trick. A lot of people already know this, but gloss sealer, Reaper makes one, a lot of people make them. But it's a nice kind of coverage over it, and you cover it over and you can hide the tiny little mold lines. Say even on your bones models and you got those mold lines you can't get to, can't clean without ripping them or whatever, boom, pop a little gloss coat on there, and it does as well. All right, so now waters. We are painting with two different kinds of paint, in my opinion. We're painting with a metallic paint, or painting with an acrylic paint to follow up with. Use two different waters. Also, it might help to use two different brushes. I'm going to just use this one brush today and clean it out in between, because what we do not want is we want to have a pot with water where we're cleaning our brush for metallics and keep it there. And we do not want that metallic flake getting in with our acrylic paints. The acrylic paint can get in with the metallic paint, no big deal, but not the flecky flecks, the sparkliness, the shininess into the acrylic paints. So I'm going to, if you guys have the colors on, go ahead and over the blue, use your tarnished steel, and we're just going to do a nice covering. Oops, let's get on the screen. I have it zoomed in a lot, so I'm just trying to make sure I stay into the camera, or within the camera, I should say. Oh, back to base coats. We want to make sure, now, anytime you're doing a nice base coat, you want to make sure it is as smooth and clean as possible. And you want as good a flat and even homogeneous coverage as you can. Just each layer that you build up, you want to make sure that there's a nice even layer underneath, and that'll help with your shading and your highlighting. And it's important with shaded metallics as well. See, that'll help it read a little bit better. I have not done any blue on his foot. So let me put a little steel there. And you see how it's hard to see. I guess it's, you can read it in the camera. And Justin, tell me if you can see it better on the output. You could see, at least I can see it in person, that over the white, that tarnished steel just is less impactful. Over the blue, it really helped it pop even more, which is, that's the reason why I do that. So let's go over to the green side, and I'm just going to grab the old bronze and do a nice coverage. And you'll notice that I'm not really super diluting my metallic paints. I got I have a little, my wet palette is full of water. It's drenched in water. It's like right to the top where the paper is. And I do that a lot of times because I'll dip a little bit of water in there, and then I'll have a little water next to whatever color I'm pulling from. And then I'll just kind of do my own mix at that time and do it 1-to-1. The thing with metallic paints is you can get them too thin. The good thing about Reaper paints in general is you can get them really, really thin easily with the acrylic colors. Metallic paints tend to, the metallic flecks tend to break apart, and it tends to just not get a great coverage. I usually just do it 1-to-1, and you'll see why. So. And see, somebody posted up the other colors on there. I think that, thank you much for, that's very helpful. All right. So we're gonna let that dry down a little bit. So I'm gonna wash my brush out. And when I'm gonna make this a little consistent with the other guys that I've already kind of mocked up a little bit. This is Auburn Shadow, if you really want to follow along with all the exact colors that we're using today. I'm just going to put a quick and sloppy coat underneath here. And what I like to do is, of course, when you're painting a figure, typically you're going from the inside out. You're painting the deepest parts first and you're working your way up, right? For the classes, we're just doing shaded metallics, right? But I would have painted his underneath garments first. And I would have painted all of this and then gone to the knee pads and everything, just so I can have a better read of what's going on. It gives you a sense of how you're working these shadows. All right, so we have, hopefully I've stalled enough to give enough time to everybody have a good coating or base coating of their shaded metallic or their metallic paint, the bronze and the steel. And it doesn't have to be the exact ones, of course, and you can have a different miniature, of course, but just have a nice good coverage on it. So what we're gonna do is, you hear me praise the virtues of liners all the time, and my favorite color in the world, for all of you that don't already know, and Tish was joking about it, was blue liner, right? And here are, well, there's red shadow, green liner, and brown liner. These are colors that you guys should already have. I mean, you should already have a bunch of blue liners just from me overselling it all the years. But one of the best colors ever. But also red shadow, green liner, and brown liner we're going to be using today, and I use a ton with shaded metallics. And this is how we start shading. Now there's a few school of thoughts, and I used to do this. I used to grab like a desaturated gray and start knocking back and start doing the shadows. I did that, and it ended up being, for me, almost an unnecessary step. But just so we're not saying you have to buy these paints in order to do these techniques. At the end of the day, if you don't have it, you can use black. And we'll even do some examples of using black too, because I want to make sure that you can apply this to anything. And people will ask, well, what's your color? What colors do you use for this? And a lot of times I don't remember. You know, for metallics, it's pretty, I use old bronze, I use tarnished steel, whatever. But really for anything, the paint colors can always change. And even the underlying colors. I may not always use ash and blue. I'm going to use whatever desaturated blue I can grab the quickest. But what we're going to do is, what we're looking to do with shaded metallics is to, for instance, let's look at her, take her armor, for instance, where she has like a steel plate, and where the light falls off of hitting into a reflection of a metal, where light hits metal is where it's going to be its most intense, and metal's going to hit a hot highlight. Then it's going to drop down to a zone that is your mid-tone zone, and that's really, it can end up just being the metallic paint that you apply to it. Where that light falls away, it gets dark so quickly. And that is what with the whole theory behind doing shaded metallics is focusing on where that where the light is not hitting the metal surface and capturing that atmosphere, capturing that vibe, capturing that light source. That's how you're capturing and really starting with shaded metallics as well. So we want to, and I started on this guy, knock down where the shadows are starting to fall. So you'll see on him what I like to do, and you've heard me talk about this on the Crow's Nest show a bunch of times and other things, but line everything again, line it all again, and line it some more. Lining is really super critical in shaded metallics. It's in non-metal metal as well. Anything where you want a super high contrast, lining is super, super important. So we have painted some metallics on. We have our base coat on our little guy. We're moving our little cup of cleaning the metallic paint away from us, so we're not tempted to do it. We're making sure that we have a nice clean brush with no metal flakes in it, because our goal right now is to try to, and hopefully achieve, knocking back all the shininess, because we're like, all right, I just painted this guy with my metallic color. Man, it reads the light really well. It picks up the light, and that's one of the draws for metallic paints. It really pops easy. It pops with one coat coverage, right? However, it's popping everywhere. So we want to be able to control the light source. And the good thing about metallic paints is that they're super shiny and they're super reflective, and they're super easy to get good reflectiveness. The bad thing about them is that they're super shiny, they're super reflective, and they're super, they translate all the light super easily. And you want to be able to say, this is where I want it to be. So for this guy, I grab my blue liner, and you'll see I've got it right here. And the thing is super thin, and I will start working in the deepest shadows first. And when you talk about shading, we usually go mid-tone, and then we'll go next step down, next step down, next step down. What we're doing with shaded metallics is we're taking mid-tone, which is our metal color, and we're going all the way to the darkest shadow point, and then we're gradually working back up to the middle. So you're mid-tone right here, instead of off screen, we're dark, and then we're bringing up to this area, and I'll show you how. So that was my black. So a little bit of a blue liner. I accidentally mixed a little black in there. It's no biggie. And let's see, we're in there. I'll start taking underneath the plate, and I'll start off super thin. And you're going to notice when you start using this technique on a metal surface, it's almost like, and it's not just almost, it really is, the metal paint and the acrylic paint don't really like to play with each other initially. You need to build up kind of a base coat on it. And yes, I just painted on my finger. That brush isn't working with me right now. So you'll have to, initially you're going to be building in the shadows a little bit, and it's going to take a few applications to get the acrylic paint to build up an adhesion layer with the metallic paint. It's just going to build a film, and then it'll start taking it and taking it and taking it. You want to try to be, yes, less is more. Less is super important. Oh, do I pick a light source direction before I start painting? Was a question? Yeah, of course. And I should have talked about that. This will just be top source lighting. Let's just make it simple instead of something crazy, some crazy angle. We're basically just doing top source lighting. So if the light was coming down, then we'll just highlight that direction. So come back in with a little blue liner, and we will pick out. So another kind of trick, especially when you're learning to do it, or even I still do this all the time. I will take my blue liner, my black or whatever, and even if I haven't painted an area surrounding the shaded metallics, and this will probably read better for the camera anyways, I will come in and darken it all up around, like even in the middle here. And what this will do, it'll just help that contrast cell just a little bit more. But no, the thing with the shading too is, again, less is more here. Work towards. And a rule that, a big kind of level up tip that I got relatively early on was, and this is something that's really super obvious, you've probably heard it a million times, is when you're shading, pull towards the shadows. When you're highlighting, pull towards the highlights. This is really important with shaded metallics. And when I'm teaching the class, we'll talk about this. And then we'll go around the room and we'll watch everybody do it. And I can tell who started doing pulling towards the shadow and who kind of forgot, because it's easy to forget. You get into it, you'll start moving around. Because if you pull towards the midtone, you'll see a line transition. And what we want to try to avoid is a line transition. We want that shaded just to blend in with the metals and knock it back. And why we're placing these shadows is to really just make that shininess go away. And even if you get just a little bit too much on, super thin coats are really important, because you can just pull it away into the shadows. If you got it too far here, you can just work it in and pull it in a little bit more. So there is kind of the initial starting points on the steel. Now for and I used blue liner for steel because that steel to me it's got a kind of a blue tint to it as well. You can use brown liner too. Brown liner will just give it more weathered, pewterish kind of thing. Another paint that we're not going to super focus on today, but one that I really like to use, I should be talking into the mic, is aged pewter. It's an older metallic paint. It's awesome as well. It kind of gives you a bridge in between tarnished steel and old bronze. But let's kind of talk about the bronze a little bit and shading for that. A few more initial options. You can use blue liner for that. It's fine if you want to do that. I like two main colors. Well, the brown liner for me and the old bronze is my go-to. And your same basic technique. I'm just working in to the shadow areas, and I'm trying not to eat up too much of the metallic space. I'm just trying to say, all right, the light's hitting and it's going to hit, and my highlights, as I get it on screen, my highlight's going to be right around here, right? Right around there. So I want to knock in the shadows this way. And then I want to also sell some more of the dark shadows in this area. And yes, I have it primed with that Auburn Shadow red color underneath. But I want to really knock it back in. Oh, let's go back right here. And if you haven't noticed, when I paint, I tend to dance around all the miniature and be painting a bunch of things at once. So sometimes it's hard for me to stay focused on one little area. But I miss this plate. See the plate underneath here? This is a great opportunity to take your super dark, because this is something that won't be showing in the light. I'm showing it out there like you could see it. But if you knock it back underneath, That's giving you your shadow area. And one of the things, and we're going to do this panel thing tomorrow, where we talk about leveling up and what makes a good paint job. I was thinking about some questions, and we'll go into it in much greater depth tomorrow. But what do you think about when you're painting? And I think one thing that you should always be focused on, at least I do, is how am I achieving contrast through the entire process? Well, base coats, you don't really need to worry about it. But once you start putting colors on, and then it's contrast with light and dark, it's contrast with contrasting colors, and contrast in intensity, it's contrast in all shininess versus non-shininess when you're using metallics as well. So how are you popping that? And then to achieve that good contrast with shaded metallics is you really need to get that super dark shadow, because at least with shaded metallics, you've already got a really nice light source popping on your metal that's helping you direct. If you ever, again, kind of for the newer folks out there too, if you're ever like, I don't know where I need it to go, I don't need where it needs to be, put your miniature up to a light, a good strong light, and see how it reads. Now, this isn't a good example because the focus is off, but for me, I can see even this camera's got a little bit of light on it. I've got my highlights going right there. So a lot of the time you're going to be spending hitting and creating your shaded areas. And again, the most important thing here is move your metallic paint away, have your brush cup with, your cleaning thing. I use these little prep cups, sous chef cups that my wife got at TJ Maxx. They're really cool. And I can't break them. I had some ceramic ones I kept dropping on the floor, and then they died quickly. But knock these shadows in and work it up a little bit, and it will take time, and be patient. The tendency is when you are learning a new technique, you overdo each step. You're like, all right, now I'm shading, I'm going to shade the shit out of this, and shadow becomes too big. Now I'm going to highlight the shit out of this, and it's going to be even bigger. So just keep it easy, keep it simple, and work the process a little bit more. You can see where I've worked this guy a little bit deeper. You see where he's got some shading in him as well. And I come back here, and since I've been talking so much, just so you guys can see, since we only got a little over an hour 15 or so for the show, for the class today, where I have basically on this guy, I had worked to basically a little bit past the extent that we've done here. And so he's already there. And I wanted to say, okay, here's after we've put some coats on and there's been some adherence of that darker paint trying to read in, that it starts building that film. Now I really can come back and work this a little bit more. And don't be afraid, as much as I've said, be subtle, take your time, work the little areas and work them in, pull towards the shadows. You'll see on this guy, he's got little folds on his armor where the armor comes down and it kind of lips up at the very lip of it, rim of the armor. And so make sure you get some blue liner or your shadow color, and you pop out, you line in where that fold is happening. And this is a size 0 Winsor Newton. Not even a series, not even a miniature series, just a big 0, or big for me. And really sell parts of the sculpt and make it a little more interesting. So that helps that pop a little bit more. We're also... I'm just seeing if I'm missing anything, and I'm sorry if I'm not catching any questions or anything. It's a little hard to do this. Remember, am I teaching my class and everything, and looking up and seeing all the questions. So, Justin, if you don't mind, if you see anything that's like glaring that you think would be a good question or is popping out, please let me know. Okay, you there?
Absolutely.
Cool, buddy. Now. With this guy, so some of the thing with shaded metallics is, and with any metallics, pick your focal areas, pick where you want the attention to read. What I like with this guy with his side pads, I want to say his thigh pads coming down, his hip pads. Like if you ever played football, you have these hip pads. Well, he's got exaggerated hip pads that come all the way down his leg. With this, this part right here. This part right here is going to be highlight. So knowing that's highlight, I'm going to knock down this area with the shadow color. And I'm pulling towards the shadow. And then it's going to just, boom, it's going to help it read a little bit more. And that's the first coat there. So let's jump to my bronze guy really quick, just so we're not playing favorites here. Now, one thing, and even afterwards, if you're going to post up some of the miniatures that you worked on this during the class or whatever, I would like to hear, even if you want to post it up in my little chat thing or whatever, I always ask this poll during the class is, okay, you've done some bronze, you've done some you've done some metal like steel. Tell me which one you thought was easier to shade, because it's generally a split. I'm not going to tell you mine. I would in the class, but I don't want to ruin anything. I want you to kind of come up on your own thought of what you think's easier. Now I'm going to build some brown liner in. The same thing we did for the steel guy, we're going to do on the bronze guy here. And I'm going to use that brown liner and pull towards the shadow super thin and hit back that reflectiveness. And hit it back just a little bit more. I want to see how we're doing on time. We're doing great. And then now I've been using brown liner. Let's see what does red liner do with bronze. Now we've got a red cloak underneath. Metal is of course super reflective. So how are we? We're going to do some glazing and tinting to really accentuate how reflective metal can be and how it can just like pull colors from all over the place. Definitely be thinking about that. But even with your shadow colors, you can use your red liner here. And since I have this cloak underneath or whatever, I should probably learn the terms to the various armors and parts more than I do.
Hey, Proctor?
Yeah.
Did you answer Dr. Bob's question by chance?
What was Dr. Bob's question?
Do you ever break the liner? Like, how thin do you go?
I don't think you can break a liner. Let me see. I have never.
On screen right now?
Yeah, I'm breaking it down right now. I have never broken down a line. I've never gotten it too thin where I don't find it useful. I tend to be a little bit thicker with it, and I would say practice and hone your skills thinner. But as you get better, work with thicker paint when you can. It gives a better result, in my opinion. You get more of what you need and less. You don't have to touch the miniature as much with different layers of paint, and I like that. Sometimes you could overwork a piece and you could see that it's been overworked. And because if you're not letting if you get super thin layers and you don't let them dry, especially when you're doing, this is outside of metallics, when you're doing faces or whatnot, you could see it gets pebbly on skin tones and faces in particular because they're so light. That's because a lot of times could be water, but a lot of times you're not letting your individual layers of paint dry. It's so much less of an impact with shaded metallics. It's good to be less, but I can take this straight blue liner and use it to shade down. And let's say I'm going to screw up on purpose, not just normally like I normally do. Let's just. All right. See, I just made this part. Let's dry it out. Way too dark. Maybe you like that, but I didn't want to go that dark on it. So,
sure.
Dr. Bob, did I answer your question? I think I did.
Yeah.
Shading principles
Also,
apply
that
to
would turn
copper
me
and
down if
brass.
you could.
Do what now?
So it would turn me down if you could, because it sounds like I might be a little loud.
Justin is a robot. Is that better?
Is that better, guys?
All right. I think my good friend Michael Dutcher asked a question. Do same shading principles apply to copper and brass? Oh, yeah, of course. Copper and brass tend to be a little bit brighter of colors, and I would end up a lot of times, even for copper and brass, I would start with bronze. I would just bring in, and we'll do this in a little bit. Bring in some. Let's put it underneath the camera. Some other colors, and this is just Pirate's Gold. I grabbed. Here's Rose Gold, which could end up being brassy, very easy, and we can throw that in as well. Let's put that to the side. All right, so we're at 9:40. I want to make sure we cover everything potentially, and then time for questions. Now, with this dude as well, let's hit some. Oh, we're going to talk about me screwing up, which happens a lot. Say you screw up, and you're like, "Oh, I shaded the shit out of that. I shouldn't have shaded it that much. Way too much shading." Come back in with your metallic paint, your base coat. And if you just try to brush on, you're going to see brush strokes. And so you've tried to get this nice blending gradation into the shadow. This is where you practice with the tip of your brush and you stipple in. And you can stipple back in a little highlight area. And this is not only something when you're learning, you're going to find when you're been painting something and you're like working at it and you've knocked in a shadow area, like, yeah, I kind of like that initially, but now I'm not digging it so much. You come back in and you can re-pick out areas that were knocked down. And you'll see, all right, I'm stippling this in. And you want to almost make this, it's almost like, think of it like a patch. I'm patching this mistake, and now I've got to blend it in to make it read a little bit more. I'm going to stipple this in a little bit bigger than I want it to be at the end. Clean my brush. Make sure I get all the metal flakes out, because we don't want the metal flakes bleeding into the shadow area, because that ruins the effect of the light not hitting the metal. If the light if the light's not hitting the metal shouldn't be shiny. So that's where the result we're trying to achieve. So I come back with my, I made my patch a little bit bigger than I wanted it to be. Come back in with my, in this case, blue liner for steel. And I start working just the edges, pulling away, pulling towards wherever the shadow area I wanted it to be, and blending that in a little bit better. So that way you can pop another highlight a little bit more. And that technique is what you do when we're kind of at the point, a little stage here of, let me work a little bit more shadow here on this guy, so we can show some highlights on the metal. So really with shaded metallics, you are, so far all we've done is we've used 2 metallic paints and we've just basic coated with it. Everything else that we've done, all the fine work that we've done so far, has been with your standard acrylic paints. We're going to change that up just in a second. I just want to knock these down a little bit more. And at this time, like, you could be asking, all right, so you use blue liner on the steel. What about all your other liners that you put out on your palette? You can throw those in as well. And you'll see with Quixote here, this is steel. This is tarnished steel that was on there. And there's all different kinds of glazes. You'll see a lot of glazes, and I want to make sure we have time to talk about that too. But a lot of the shading isn't just blue liner. There's red and brown mixed in there as well. And what I'll do is this is a smaller figure, so it's a little bit harder to read. I would, if you're learning shade metallics and you have some big busts or something like that, or something big, huge armored thing, you got something in bones, go for it. That will help you practice your shaded metallics even more. Like anything, since I'm on this before I forget, any class that you're taking this weekend or anytime you take a class, take the class, get what you can. And that nice thing with these is they're going to be on video. They're recorded. They're cool. But practice it. In class, we will do one of these figures, and I'll say, okay, do these. Just do this guy's plates, like this little section right here. Just do these, and the class will do them. I'm like, okay, you feel all right, and they look good. They look like someone's just learning how to do it. I'm like, okay, now do this next plate, and they'll do that, and it looks better. And then, okay, you did that one. Now the third attempt, do this section over here. By each time, they're leveling up each time, and so that's the recommendation with any classes you're taking. Each time you do this, you learn a new technique. You have to practice it to get the muscle memory, to get the thought behind it, and to feel comfortable behind it. The more you feel comfortable in doing it, the better results you're going to get. So that's my word. That's my lesson of the day. And then, so I grabbed some blue and some red and green liner a little bit, and I'm just trying to add just a little bit more dark shading to it as well. Now, highlighting. When a metal surface hits the hot light, the direct light, it's going to go pretty much blowout white. And that's kind of what you want to sell as well. Sophie Shining Mithril. There's a Sophie Silver and there's a Shining Mithril. All really, really good. I use them. I do talk about this in my classes, and I don't want to miss it. I know it's a ReaperCon. This is a non-Reaper paint. It's called Metal Medium by Vallejo. I actually have Shining Mithril on my palette right now, but this is another paint that I don't want to neglect using. It's a great super spot highlight paint. We'll use that a tiny bit. But so for my Shining Mithril, you'll see it's over here on my palette in the top here. I got it a little dirty. That's okay. I will take my... so when you have your metallic paint on your palette, if you let it sit, it'll start to break apart. So just mix it back together. And you don't want to use your really nice brush to mix it back together. You should be using the end of your brush. Or if you have an old clay shaper that you bought that you don't use, especially if you made a mistake and you bought the lighter colored ones, the darker ones are better for sculpting. You can use that to mix your paint, which I should have been doing. And that helps mix it a little bit better. And it's easier to clean. And then you can stir this up a little bit. Mix it up. All right, so clean my brush really well. Get some of the steel and what I'm making is just a little bit more of a gradation, if you can see on the palette cam. And I can even move this into frame a little bit better. There's my little gradation of metallic paints. And what I'm going to come in now, like I said with shading, we're starting off less is more, and we're working it up, we're pulling in, we're looking for that gradation. The highlight is even more, less is more. Pick your spots. Don't overdo them. When you're highlighting anything, metallic or not, pick your hot highlights, pick your spot highlights, and the less they are, the more impactful they are. The more you do them, it's like, that's just really bright. There's nothing like giving me great contrast. So what I'll do is I like to come in and I'll hit the rivets with silver this time. A lot of times you'll see I will hit anything that's like a rivet or a line a lot of times if I'm really looking for some more interest and contrast. Since he's predominantly steel, I'll hit with, like, this is kind of what I did with this guy. I will hit the rivets and whatnot. Since he's predominantly steel, I'll hit some of the axe hit points with bronze, because the steel color and the bronze color are kind of complementary to each other. They help with contrast with one another. They kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, that one works well, and there's some blue in there, and there's some yellow orange in there, so they kind of help play off each other a little bit more, and that's what I like to try to do. Same thing with this guy. This is just really all the metallics are down here with the treasures and what have you. But you'll see you can use your metallic paints to play off one another. And since there's just so much gold, I did want the gold line chest for this little goblin king, which, by the way, goblins are green. I'm just saying that was a discussion yesterday, in my opinion. And then, but I wanted some steel in there too, just to kind of throw the contrast in there. So don't be afraid. Be thinking. I guess why I went down that road is to make sure that you're still using your metallic paints for contrast as well. So let's go back to me focus in and get some of the highlights done. Let's see. What'd you say, Justin? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me,
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we're good.
Ah, fuck. Sorry about that. How long was I out? I said a lot of great things. Can you hear me, Justin? All right. I was always on.
Yeah, it's. I think your headset died, Proctor.
Okay. So were you trying to talk to me?
No. I was just letting you know that your Discord wasn't picking you up, so I wasn't hearing you in real time.
Okay. But now you can. We're all good, right? Okay. So back to the class. And Justin's just Justin messing up life. Yeah, Reaper Collins, I get it. Anyways, no, Justin does a great job. Let's go back to we're hitting the highlights. Look, got a little thrown off there, and so highlights, less is more. Let's make sure we're hitting the edges. All right, so even like with the old Space Marines and anything, you always want to hit the edges of the plates. That's still a really good rule. Make sure that you save. That's why I like a little gradation mix here, is I want to save my hottest highlight for the one little spot, but I still want to catch the edges of the plates with the metallic paint, with the shiny stuff, I should say. And let's go here. Make sure it's hard with the screen to make sure that the camera's on and everything. I do like to move figures around so I can get the best possible angle with the brush, especially when you're doing highlight areas. You don't feel like you've got to contort your brush to where you need to be. Move the miniature to where it's easiest for you to paint, of course, and then be working your highlights a little bit more. I saw Rhonda was on. Hey, you guys, there's a new Patreon account out there, Bird with a Brush. Rhonda's just started it. I think it was yesterday. So if you guys get some extra time and you want to go check it out, go check it out. There is a cool Pieces of 8 paint. There's part of the whole Reaper box set. If you guys get a hold of it, it's got a really nice kind of tint to it. It's still very metallic-y. But it has this nice little reflectiveness to it. I'm going to pull that in for some of these highlights in the area here, in the kind of this mid-tone-ish spot highlight of the plate. And you can see just kind of popping that in brings this back a little bit more and brings it a little more interest to it. I have a hard line right here. If you can see it, I'm going to come back in. I'm going to mix in a little bit of the pieces of 8 color with the tarnished steel and do a tiny bit of stippling with that. Okay. And then what's going to end up being as you start working the metallics, and this is where it really becomes important to either have 2 brushes, or if you're only going to use one, to keep it clean. You're going to start going back and forth at this point and trying to pick stuff out. And then I'm going to take my Shining Mithril, the hottest highlight paint, and I'm going to come in super small and start picking out what I want as the super highlight colors. Like on the corner here, like just a little bit. Not the whole, like not do the whole line, but just a little bit. I've already kind of knocked it down a little bit. And then, okay, I clean this up. I'm going to come back in with my blue liner. I'm going to mix a little brown line in there, just give it a more weathered look to it. And then come in and knock it down. And so where I'm going with this is you're playing constantly, going back and forth a lot and working out the final result. Don't be thinking, all right, I'm going to base coat, I'm going to put my metal on, I'm going to shade it down, I'm going to be highlight, boom, I'm done. It is learning the steps, but then throwing them all together and working it back and forth. And the kind of one of the tricks, one of the steps is, as you want to level up your work, spending that extra time going back and forth, tweaking a little bit more, and as you're in the process and everything, keep it separated. I like to do the elbow lock kind of look, and you can only see it on my little screen right now. Put it at eye's length, separate, give yourself a distance, and it's really important too with shaded metallics, just to kind of give you, like, you could be all up in its grill and looking at it and focus on this one thing, going, I'm not quite sure. But if you pop it away a little bit more, it reads to like, oh, okay, I see what I'm doing. I see this is reading a little bit better to me. All right, so we got 15 minutes left. Now, I talk about, and lots of folks love to talk about the clear colors. And I love them too. I think they're great. Here's a little smattering of the clear colors. Clear purple, clear blue, clear magenta, clear green, clear orange. There's another kind of crazy green. There's a clear red. There's this phthalo blue. All kinds of great stuff. I'm just going to grab clear purple. Little on the palette. And what these are the clear colors, right? But why am I picking them is they're super intense pigment. They are super intense, and they are great. And since they're such an intense pigment, they thin out really well, and they're really good for making glazes. And I'm gonna, now, if you don't have these, you have other intense colors, great, use those, just as easy. Again, my kind of rule is I will use these colors and I'll talk about them, but I tend to use what's the closest thing for me to grab. If I'm sitting at my desk and I just have these paints in front of me and I'm like, oh, that's close, so I can make that work. I'm gonna do it as well. All right, so all kinds of effects you can do in glazing, and you can see on this Monique, this is a 54 millimeter miniature. It's a Reaper figure, but you'll see that I had the steel, and then I have, you can see there's blue in there, and there's purple in the shadows as well. I shaded this already with the blue liner approach, and then I came back in and added tinting. You'll see Michael Dutcher asked about, copper and brass and stuff. This is kind of gives it a copper and brass effect. This was with old bronze, and then I popped it up a little bit with some it's like pirate gold or whatever the color was at the time that was close to this. And then I'm using a lot of glazing, and that'll give you a lot of that effects and tying in. And what I was trying to achieve with her is she's got this really fun cloak with all these colors into it as well. I wanted some of those colors to bleed into her armor. Well, it's steel armor, so I wanted to try to say, all right, it's going to be pulling a lot of the blues from it as well, but also into the purples and pull that into, and then with the brass up here, how is that pulling in some of the magentas and then kind of contrasting it with a little green. Now, you don't have to, with anything, coolness, a lot of times for me, outweighs realisticness. If that makes sense. If it's like, I want to add this, I want it to be really cool, but have intent with it, but it don't always have to follow. This is red here, so I got to pull red into it. Pull in a little bit different tint of that red. Pull in if it's kind of a bluish red, pull in more of a darker purple, and then bleed it into a magenta or whatever. And then what's the contrasting color is green. Maybe throw a little green in there too. That'll make the eye pay attention, the viewer's eye pay attention a little bit more. So simple, easy, more comfortable. Some people are like, ooh, I don't know if I want to take my shade of metallics, and I've spent so much time on them, I'm afraid I'm going to overdo it and ruin them. So if you just want to initially kind of dip your toes into the glazing part of this, the tinting part. All right, so glazing versus tinting. Tinting to me is taking a intense color, super thin, and shifting the overall tonal effect of the range. Glazing to me is more of a thin paint, smoothing out a transition. So tinting is kind of altering the color a little bit. Glazing is more of smoothing transitions. That's the way I personally define it. That's the way I think about it. The two terms can be interchangeable for a lot of folks, but that's when I'm talking about. That's what I'm doing. So right now we're tinting, and so I'll take that blue liner and I'll put. See, there's a good little pool on there right now. That's way too much, but it's so thin and it's so saturated that, and you're pulling towards the shadow. I don't want to lose my highlight in my tinting. I want these tints should be in your mid-tone range and going down into your shadows and being lost in your shadows, because this is a nice way to your shadow color, your shading color, the blue liner that we use, for instance, in this, ends up being almost like your stop. And it helps almost as kind of like a cheat. You can pull. I put too much of the blue on, and I do it intentionally, and I can pull it into my blue liner, and it just kind of sucks it up and says, "All right, no more. You can't see that anymore." And then I can come back in with a little more blue liner. Clear blue. And just hit a couple more areas, and then I can even come back in with my blue liner, and after I've tinted, and work some linings even more, and that'll give it a nice read. So that was super safe. I've been shading with blue. I'm going to add some blue tinting and blue steel. I can't do the pose or whatever. That's Austin Powers. Here is some purple. I love purple. Love dark purple, carnival purple, Proctor punch purple, which one day will come out. I think it's part of the Kickstarter. It's awesome. Clear purple is really close to it. It's a little lighter. You can add some blue liner to clear purple, and maybe you'll get closer to the color that I love. Just a little tip. Here's a little clear purple in there. And again, in that part, since I already have some blue liner on there, I just want to add a little more in effect. I'll just put it in one little localized area, and then add that blue, add that purple. And it may not be reading perfectly through all the video stuff. One thing I found that shade of metallics read awesome in person and photograph well. You gotta take a little extra time photographing them as well. Non-metal metal photographs awesome and reads well in person too when executed appropriately. But I think shaded metallics really pop out, especially on the gaming table, but even in the miniature stuff and in the competition room. I personally like to see it, but maybe just because I'm drawn to it a little bit more. All right, so I talked about the contrasting colors, and so we haven't had any green on this guy whatsoever. So let's just do a tiny bit of green. Now, while it's still wet, you can move it around a little bit, and that's why I like it super thin. And the really intense pigments will help you thin it out a lot more. And you know, like Dr. Bob said, you can't. It's harder to break those colors. So the less intense pigments, the easier it is to break. For me, the more intensity of the pigments, and each color is going to be a little bit different, the easier it is to break. Now, rust. Have we got time? Got plenty of time. Let's find. Oh, let's go over to this guy, and not this guy. This guy. And so we've added some red and whatnot. Let's look at some tinting for. Here's some clear purple on his big side plate here. And I put a lot on, but I controlled, and my highlight area is right here. So I didn't want to lose that. So I just moved it around into the place where I needed it to be. I'm mixing in a tiny bit of clear magenta into it as well. And I'm kind of playing into the zone on this lower plate. And playing into the zone there too. Then we want to, let's do a little rust. Rust is probably easiest to show on camera on a steel gun. Super, super, super easy. I already really have that Auburn Shadow on there. Now, is rust shiny? In my opinion, no. Rust is usually where water would pool up or things wouldn't get cleaned as much. Again, I think with any kind of effect, whether we're tinting or glazing or whatever, less tends to be more. And that's, I mean, the less you do it, the more realistic that it will read. Being intentional with it, not overdoing it. Even like when you add blood splatter or something on something, it's more the intent, and the delivery reads a lot better than it is. So there's that. If you wanted to see, I haven't showed up this guy yet. Here is some more. Wow, he's really close up. Steel, and this is me playing with the greens, since there's a lot of foliage here, going down into the purples for his bronze breastplate, knocking down in that as well. And then because I also have purple in his little loincloths and what have you. And I can't get him far enough away. And then same thing with these plates. They almost become a little bit iridescent, and you can play with that. This is just old bronze with various glazes of the clears and thrown in there as well. And you can pop them well, and then popping up various highlights and what have you. So it's a great effect to play with. There are all different kinds of metallic colors, and there's all these metallic colors that are true like colors, like a green metallic and a pink metallic and a purple or a blue metallic. I don't really paint with those a ton because I like to be able to control my tinting and glazing. And if I really want it to go blue or really want it to go green, I can do that with a tinting effect. And I think it gives you that control. Now, if you really want just to be quick and easy and go for that colored effect, that's awesome. The Drow Silver is really, really cool color. The Mermaid Scale, I think the Mermaid Scale is really cool. There's limited uses for it, but it's a really fun shiny color as well, and it can have some applications. But for true shaded metallics, the way that I've always kind of practiced them, I like to have my base colors and then tint and control my gradations of the colors that way. And then I wanted to see that we're kind of at what we have 5 minutes left, right, Justin? I'm going to say that we do. Can you show the Mermaid Scale real quick? Sure. What did I do with it? There it is. So Mermaid Scale is, that's it. So it's got this kind of bluish tealness to it. Let's put it on a figure and see what happens. It's really cool. It's got a lot of it's got a lot of sparkle in it. And where we use it. Let's use it here. We'll use it more as a highlighter's color. So since I'm putting this on, and I'm just more going to kind of control a little bit on the high mid-tone area and create that. I haven't really had any shading on this piece at all, on this plate. And then it reads a little blue line. You can achieve that, of course, with this. You could have also taken a clear color or an intense blue, a little bit lighter. Some of the Phantom Glow, some of these colors are really cool to throw into metallics as well. So you can throw that in. I hope that helped. I hope that answered the question. It is super shiny. But yeah, it's kind of pearlized. Those are kind of neat, and I would save those as your kind of effect colors. And I'm kind of liking it the more I'm looking at it. I wanted to see, since we have some extra time. Well, I can't find the Drow color. Yeah, that's really cool as well. I played around with it. Oh, here's some rose gold, which I thought was kind of cool too. So you guys can see rose gold if you're interested. There it is, right? So how would you use that? I could use that as highlighting in a copper or a use for a high copper. It would be really cool, I think, if you have a treasure pile, to throw in, like, there's some copper going on right here from an old copper paint that I had. I mean, I think having these additional metallic colors is a quick way to throw in various little pieces of the different colors. And then let's just show the rose gold, and I'll get to the pieces of 8 color as well. And where would you want to do this? Let's just put it on this. So it could be a fun kind of highlight area. Let's go to this guy and throw the rose gold in there. Could help with popping some of the rivets. Maybe add a copper thing on his little symbol, his hammer symbol. Kind of cool. Pieces of 8. So Pieces of 8 is a color that I do plan on using quite a bit, and it reminds me a lot of the aged pewter. I wish I could find that. Anyways, it reminds me a lot of aged pewter, and it's a little bit lighter tint of it and a little bit less intense, but it's a great it's a great middle between the bronze and the tarnished steel. I do plan on, like I said, using this quite a bit, and it would be a nice, like, okay, I've got this bronze guy and I'm gonna get the freaking miniature on camera. Let's pop him a little bit more. And then bring in some of my mithril mixed in with that. And add some more highlights and whatnot to it. So, cool. Taking a lot of notes, and let's see if they help improve my metallics game. All right, so we're getting close to the end. I hope that's helped everybody out. Thanks, Michael. And I saw Mike Disney's on. We have, holy crap, over 300 people, which is really cool. I want to give a plug out to the Crow's Nest. There's a little logo on the bottom. That's the show Justin and I do on Tuesdays. We won't be doing it this Tuesday because it'll be after ReaperCon, but it'll be on almost every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Central. We're gonna have a new setup coming up soon. More guests popping on in the next shows. We like to do, if you guys haven't seen it before, it's like me painting along and doing interviews with a lot of the folks in the hobby, painters, sculptors, folks at Reaper, what have you. Last episode we did with Frank at Nightheart Gaming, he's running a kick-ass D&D thing tonight, where our little group, me and Rhonda and Jen and Jason, Gene, and Bobby, were going to hell, literally. Well, game-wise. So it's a little D&D thing that'll be going on tonight. So check that as well, and check out the Crow's Nest. Check out all the other shows that are on as well. Thanks for tuning into this. Justin, are you around still, or?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just hearing all the audio, like I said, kind of a few seconds in delay.
Okay. That's weird. I don't understand why that's happening. Are they hearing the same?
But thanks, guys.
They can't tell. They can't tell though, right?
It's on Discord side.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it's not me for a change. It's nice. So yeah, thank you for all that stuff. Wow, Reaper Ron. Goblins are green. I mean, look, goblins are green, and here's proof. There's a green goblin, right? So that's why goblins are green. That's who we were having a discussion yesterday. I know D&D or whatever says goblins are orange, but I like green goblins better. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you got something out of it. Wanted to also, before jump, is if you guys have any questions, you could do this Discord thing and chat with me, whatever in my little artist thing or the Michael Proctor chat thing. Feel free to do that. But you can friend me on Facebook, find my Clever Crow page on Facebook, send me messages there. If you ever have questions on things, I'm happy to help. I get a kick out of helping folks, so it's always good to give back.